You know what scares me more than anything else when I look at retirement statistics in America today? It is not the number itself. It is the gap between what people think they need and what they actually have saved. Millions of hardworking Americans are heading toward retirement, believing they are prepared, only to discover they are about to run out of money in their 70s or 80s. And here is the brutal truth nobody wants to talk about. Most of the retirement advice you have been following your entire life is outdated, incomplete, or just plain wrong. Ray Dalio, one of the most successful investors in history, built his fortune by understanding principles that most people ignore. He did not get lucky. He understood how money actually works, how economies move in cycles, and how human psychology destroys wealth faster than any market crash ever could. Today, I am going to share with you 10 brutal lessons from Dalio that every retiree needs to understand before it is too late. These are not the comfortable lies financial advisors tell you to make you feel better. These are the hard truths that separate people who retire comfortably from those who end up back at work at 75. Let me start with something Dalio said that changed how I think about retirement completely. He said that the biggest risk is not that you will lose money in the market. The biggest risk is that you will lose purchasing power over time without even realizing it. Think about that for a second. You could have $1 million sitting in your retirement account right now and still be getting poorer every single day. Here is what he means. Imagine you retired in the year 2000 with $500,000. You thought you were set for life. But over the next 20 years, the cost of health care doubled, then tripled. The cost of groceries went up. Gas prices went crazy. Housing costs exploded. Even if your account balance stayed exactly the same, your ability to buy the things you need dropped by half or more. That $1 million you saved does not buy what $1 million bought 20 years ago. And it definitely will not buy what $1 million buys today when you are 80 years old trying to pay for medications and assisted living. This is what Dalio calls the silent killer of retirement: inflation. And most retirees do not protect themselves against it because they have been taught to play it safe. They move everything into bonds and cash when they retire because someone told them that is what responsible people do. But playing it too safe is actually the riskiest move you can make. Dalio teaches us that you need to think about retirement in seasons, not in one big block of time. When you first retire at 65, you might have another 30 years ahead of you. 30 years. That is longer than most people worked at their jobs. You cannot afford to park all your money in safe investments that barely keep up with inflation. You need growth. You need assets that increase in value over time. Real estate, stocks, businesses, things that go up when prices go up. But here is where most people mess up. They treat retirement like flipping a switch. One day they are working and investing aggressively. The next day they retire and suddenly become terrified of every little market dip. Dalio would tell you that is backwards thinking. The market does not care that you retired. Economic cycles do not stop just because you left your job. You need to understand these cycles and position yourself accordingly. Let me give you a real example. Think about someone who retired in 2007, right before the financial crisis. Their portfolio got cut in half almost overnight. Panic set in. They sold everything at the bottom because they could not stomach watching their retirement disappear. They locked in those losses permanently. Meanwhile, someone who understood Dalio's principles knew that crashes are part of the cycle. They stayed calm. They kept their quality investments. And within a few years, they not only recovered but came out ahead. The difference was not luck. It was understanding how the game actually works. Dalio has a principle he lives by. Pain plus reflection equals progress. Every mistake, every loss, every financial setback is actually a lesson if you are willing to learn from it. But most retirees never reflect. They just react emotionally and make the same mistakes over and over again. They panic when markets drop. They get greedy when markets soar. They follow the crowd instead of following sound principles. And that brings me to maybe the most important lesson of all, where your retirement success has almost nothing to do with how much money you have and almost everything to do with how you think about money. The wealthy do not think about money the way regular people do. They think in systems, in principles, in long-term patterns. Ray Dalio built one of the most successful hedge funds in history, not by being smarter than everyone else, but by creating a system of principles that removed emotion from his decisions. And that is exactly what you need in retirement. Most people retire and immediately start thinking about their money all wrong. They obsess over their account balance like it is a scoreboard. They check it every day. They celebrate when it goes up and panic when it goes down. But Dalio would tell you that your account balance is just a number on a screen. What matters is what that money can do for you. What matters is the income it generates, the lifestyle it supports, the security it provides for your family. Here is a harsh reality check. If you retire with $800,000 and you think you are set for life, you might be in for a rude awakening. That money needs to last potentially 30 or 40 years. It needs to cover rising healthcare costs that could easily hit $20,000 a year or more. It needs to survive multiple market crashes because history shows us that major downturns happen about every 10 years. It needs to keep up with inflation that quietly eats away 3 or 4% of your purchasing power every single year. Do the math on that. If inflation averages just 3%, your money loses half its value every 24 years. That comfortable retirement you plan for in your 60s becomes a struggle by your 80s. And this is where Dalio's lesson about diversification becomes absolutely critical. But not the kind of diversification your financial advisor probably told you about. Most advisors will tell you to diversify by owning different stocks and bonds. That is not real diversification. That is like saying you are diversified because you own 5 different types of apples. Real diversification means owning assets that perform differently under different economic conditions. Dalio created what he calls the all-weather portfolio specifically to handle whatever the economy throws at you. Think about it like this. When inflation rises, stocks and bonds usually suffer, but commodities and real assets like real estate often thrive. When deflation hits, cash and bonds do well while stocks struggle. When growth is strong, stocks soar. When growth stalls, gold and treasury bonds protect you. The point is not to predict which scenario will happen. The point is to own pieces of all of them so that no matter what happens, part of your portfolio is working for you. But here is where retirees make their biggest mistake. They think diversification means they will never lose money. Wrong. Diversification means that when one part of your portfolio is down, another part should be up or at least holding steady. It smooths out the ride. It keeps you from getting wiped out. But you will still have down years. You will still see red numbers sometimes. And that is okay if you understand the principle. Dalio talks about something he calls radical transparency and radical open-mindedness. In retirement, this means being brutally honest with yourself about your situation. It means looking at your spending, your savings, your health, your family obligations, and seeing them exactly as they are, not as you wish they were. Most retirees lie to themselves. They pretend their spending is lower than it actually is. They assume they will spend less as they age when healthcare costs often make them spend more. They hope their kids will not need financial help when statistics show most parents end up supporting adult children at some point. Let me tell you about a couple I know. Both retired at 62 thinking they had plenty saved up. They had around $900,000 between their accounts. Sounds good, right? But they never did the honest math. They were spending $70,000 a year. They had a mortgage payment still. They helped their daughter with her kids. They took nice vacations because they felt they deserved it after working so hard. Within 8 years, their portfolio was down to $400,000, not because the market crashed, just because they were not being radically transparent with themselves about their real spending. Dalio would say they violated one of the core principles. They consumed more than they produced. In retirement, your portfolio is your production. If it is generating 5% a year through growth and dividends, that is your production. If you are spending 7% a year, you are going backwards. It is simple math, but emotion makes people ignore simple math. And this brings us to another brutal lesson. The sequence of returns matters more in retirement than almost any other factor. You could have the exact same average returns as someone else over 20 years and end up with half as much money just because of when those returns happen. Here is what I mean. Imagine you retire and the market drops 20% in your first year. You are pulling money out to live on, so you are selling stocks at the bottom. Even when the market recovers, you have permanently less money working for you. Compare that to someone who retired and the market went up 20% their first year. They are pulling from gains, their principal keeps growing, and they end up in a completely different place 20 years later, even though the average return was the same. This is why Dalio emphasizes that the first 5 years of retirement are absolutely critical. Those years set the trajectory for everything that follows. If you hit a major market downturn right when you retire and you panic, sell at the wrong time, or withdraw too much trying to maintain your lifestyle, you can cripple your retirement permanently. But if you understand this principle ahead of time, you can plan for it. Smart retirees build what Dalio would call a buffer. They keep 2 or 3 years of living expenses in cash or very safe investments. That way, when the market crashes in year 1 or year 2 of retirement, they are not forced to sell stocks at a loss. They live off their buffer and let their investments recover. It sounds simple, but most people do not do it because they get greedy. They want every dollar working hard for them all the time. They do not want cash sitting around earning nothing. But that cash is not earning nothing. It is buying you options. It is buying you time. It is buying you peace of mind. And peace of mind in retirement is worth more than most people realize. Dalio talks about how stress and bad decisions are linked. When you are stressed about money, you make terrible choices. You sell at the bottom. You chase hot stock tips. You fall for scams. You argue with your spouse. Your health suffers. I have seen retirees give themselves heart attacks worrying about their portfolios. The irony is they saved all that money to enjoy their retirement, but they are too stressed to enjoy anything. Here is another brutal truth that Dalio understands better than almost anyone. Debt in retirement is a destroyer, not just because of the interest you pay, but because it limits your options. If you retire with a mortgage, car payments, credit card debt, you are starting from behind. Every month, a chunk of your fixed income goes out the door before you even buy groceries. You cannot afford to take risks because you have obligations. You cannot weather a downturn because you do not have flexibility. Dalio would tell you to enter retirement as debt-free as humanly possible. That might mean working a couple extra years to pay off your house. That might mean downsizing before you retire instead of after. That might mean driving your car for another 3 years instead of buying new. These decisions feel like sacrifices, but they are actually investments in your freedom. A retiree with $400,000 and no debt is in a better position than a retiree with $600,000 and a $200,000 mortgage. Now let me hit you with something that most financial experts will not tell you because it goes against everything the industry teaches. Dalio believes that the traditional retirement model is broken. The idea that you work until 65, then stop completely and live off your savings for 30 years is not just outdated, it is dangerous. Human beings are not wired to go from full productivity to zero overnight. Your sense of purpose, your social connections, your mental sharpness, they all suffer when you completely stop contributing. But more than that, the math does not work for most people anymore. We are living longer than ever. Healthcare is more expensive than ever. The cost of everything keeps rising. Pensions are disappearing. Social Security is under pressure. Expecting a pile of money you saved during your working years to carry you for 3 decades is wishful thinking for the majority of Americans. Dalio would advocate for what I call the principles-based retirement. Instead of stopping work completely, you transition. Maybe you go part-time. Maybe you consult. Maybe you start a small business doing something you love. The goal is not to make your old salary. The goal is to generate enough income to reduce the strain on your portfolio. If you can bring in $20,000 or $30,000 a year doing something you enjoy, you just extended your retirement savings by years, maybe decades. And here is the beautiful part. When you are engaged in meaningful work, even part-time, you stay sharper. You stay connected. You have purpose. Studies show that people who stay engaged in some form of work during retirement live longer and report higher happiness levels than those who stop completely. Dalio built his entire philosophy around meaningful work and meaningful relationships. He did not retire at 65 and disappear. He kept contributing, kept learning, kept growing. Which brings me to maybe the most overlooked principle of all. Your health is your wealth in retirement. Dalio is obsessed with optimization, with performing at peak levels, and he knows that without your health, nothing else matters. You can have $10 million in the bank, but if you are sick, unable to enjoy life, spending it all on medical bills and treatments, what was the point? The brutal lesson here is that most retirees do not invest in their health until it is too late. They spend their working years sacrificing sleep, eating poorly, skipping exercise, building stress, all to make more money. Then they retire and their body sends them the bill. Diabetes, heart disease, joint problems, cognitive decline. And now that pile of money they save gets drained paying for the health they should have been investing in all along. Dalio would tell you to think about health as your highest return investment. Every dollar you spend on quality food, every hour you spend exercising, every good night of sleep you get, these are not expenses, they are investments that compound over time. A healthy 70-year-old can live on half as much money as a sick 70-year-old and enjoy life twice as much. Let me share something that hit me hard when I first learned about Dalio's approach to life and money. He says that most people never step back and look at their life from above like a machine. They are so busy being inside the machine, reacting to whatever happens, that they never stop to examine whether the machine is even designed correctly. And nowhere is this more true than in retirement. Think about the typical American retirement machine. You work for 40 years. You put money into a 401k that someone else manages. You hope the market does well. You hope your company does not go bankrupt. You hope inflation stays low. You hope you do not get sick. You hope your spouse does not get sick. You hope your kids do not need help. You hope you saved enough. That is a lot of hoping. That is not a machine designed for success. That is a machine designed for anxiety. Dalio built his success on removing hope from the equation and replacing it with principles. Principles are like algorithms. If this happens, then I do that. No emotion, no panic, no guessing. You have a rule and you follow it. In retirement, this might mean having a principle that says if the market drops more than 20%, I reduce my spending by 15% for the next 2 years. Or it might mean if my portfolio hits a certain level, I pick up part-time work automatically. Or if healthcare costs exceed a certain threshold, I downsize my home. These sound like extreme measures, and most people resist creating these kinds of rules because they do not want to think about worst-case scenarios. But that is exactly backwards. Having clear principles for difficult situations is what allows you to stay calm when everyone else is panicking. It is what allows you to make good decisions under pressure. Dalio survived and thrived through multiple financial crises, not because he was lucky, but because he had already decided what he would do before the crisis hit. Here is another brutal reality about retirement that nobody wants to discuss. Your relationship with money will be tested like never before. If you are married, you and your spouse might have completely different views on spending, risk, and what retirement should look like. One of you wants to travel the world. The other wants to stay close to grandkids. One of you wants to keep investing aggressively. The other wants everything in safe bonds. These differences that maybe did not matter much when you were both working and money was coming in regularly become massive sources of conflict when you are living off a fixed pile of savings. Dalio talks extensively about how to navigate disagreements through radical open-mindedness. This means genuinely trying to understand the other person's perspective, not just waiting for your turn to talk. In retirement, this is essential. You need to have honest conversations about money, about fears, about what you both want from this next chapter. And you need to create agreements, principles that you both commit to following. I know a couple who retired with plenty of money, but nearly divorced within 3 years because they never had these conversations. He wanted to buy a boat. She wanted to remodel the kitchen. He thought they should help their son buy a house. She thought the son needed to figure it out himself. Every financial decision became a battle because they had no agreed upon principles. They were just two people with different opinions fighting over the same pile of money. Compare that to couples who sit down before retirement and create their principles together. We will spend no more than this amount per year. We will keep this much in emergency funds. We will help family only under these specific conditions. We will review our plan together every 6 months. We will not make any purchase over this amount without discussing it first. Suddenly, decisions become easier because you are not arguing about opinions. You are following principles you already agreed to. Now let me tell you about one of Dalio's most counterintuitive lessons. He says that knowing what you do not know is more important than knowing what you do know. In retirement, this means understanding the limits of your knowledge and getting help in those areas. Most retirees either trust blindly or trust no one. Both approaches are dangerous. Trusting blindly means handing your money to a financial advisor and never questioning anything. You do not understand the fees you are paying. You do not know if the advice is good or if it is just good for the advisor. You do not know if your investments align with your actual goals. You are hoping someone else will take care of you, and hope is not a strategy, but trusting no one is just as bad. Some retirees become so paranoid that they refuse to get any help at all. They try to manage everything themselves, even though they do not understand taxes, estate planning, investment strategies, or healthcare options. Their pride or their fear keeps them from accessing expertise that could save them hundreds of thousands of dollars over their retirement. Dalio's approach is different. He believes in building a team of people smarter than him in specific areas, but he also believes in understanding enough to know if they are giving good advice. You do not need to become a tax expert, but you should understand enough about taxes to know if your accountant is doing a good job. You do not need to become an investment guru, but you should understand basic principles enough to know if your advisor is putting your interests first. This is especially important because the retirement industry is full of people who make money whether you succeed or not. They get paid from your fees and commissions regardless of your results. A good advisor aligned with your interests will explain things clearly, will welcome your questions, and will put you in low-cost investments that match your actual risk tolerance and timeline. A bad advisor will use confusing jargon, will discourage questions, and will put you in high-fee products that generate bigger commissions. Here is a test Dalio might suggest. If you cannot explain your retirement strategy to a friend in simple terms, you probably do not understand it well enough. And if you do not understand it, how can you know if it is right for you? Let me give you a real-world example of what I mean. I met a retiree named Robert who had worked his entire life as an electrician. Good man, hardworking, saved diligently. When he retired, he had about $700,000. His advisor put him in a mix of mutual funds with average fees of 1.3%. Sounds small, right? Just 1.3%. But here is what Robert did not understand. Over 20 years, that 1.3% fee, compounded, could cost him over $200,000. $200,000. That is almost a third of his starting balance just gone to fees. When I showed him the math, he was stunned. He had trusted his advisor completely, never questioned the fees, never compared options. His advisor was not breaking any laws. The fees were disclosed in paperwork Robert never read. But was that advisor really acting in Robert's best interest? Dalio would say you need to understand the incentives of everyone you work with. If someone makes more money when you take more risk or buy certain products, that is a red flag. You want advisors who are fiduciaries, legally obligated to put your interests first. You want transparent fees. You want to understand exactly what you are paying for and why. But beyond advisors, you need to understand your own incentives and biases. This is where Dalio's principles really shine. He has identified dozens of cognitive biases that make people bad investors and bad decision makers. In retirement, these biases can be devastating. There is recency bias, where you assume whatever just happened will keep happening. The market went up for 3 years, so you think it will keep going up and you get overconfident. Or the market crashed, so you think it will keep crashing and you sell everything at the bottom. There is confirmation bias, where you only pay attention to information that supports what you already believe. You think housing prices will keep rising, so you ignore warning signs. You think you can live on less in retirement, so you dismiss evidence that your spending is too high. There is loss aversion, where the pain of losing money is psychologically twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining money. This makes retirees irrationally afraid of stocks even when they need growth. And it makes them hold on to losing investments too long because selling would mean admitting the loss is real. Dalio's solution to all of this is systematic decision making. You create rules, principles, criteria for decisions before you are in the emotional heat of the moment. You write them down, you commit to them. And when decision time comes, you follow your system instead of your feelings. For a retiree, this might mean having a written investment policy statement. It says exactly what percentage of your portfolio goes into stocks, bonds, real estate, cash. It says under what conditions you rebalance. It says how much you will withdraw each year and how you will adjust that amount. It says what you will do if markets crash. All of this is decided calmly, rationally, when you are not stressed. Then, when the crisis hits, you do not have to make decisions under pressure. You just follow your plan. Let me hit you with one more brutal truth that Dalio understands deeply. The world is constantly changing, and your retirement plan needs to change with it. The strategies that worked for your parents' generation will not work for yours. They had pensions, they had cheaper health care, they had a different economy. You cannot just copy what they did and expect the same results. Dalio talks about understanding the economic machine, how debt cycles work, how governments respond to crises, how technology changes everything. Right now, we are living through massive changes. Interest rates swinging wildly, inflation higher than it has been in decades, political uncertainty, technological disruption, global instability. If your retirement plan was built 5 years ago and you have not updated it, you are probably in trouble. This does not mean you panic and change everything every time the news scares you. It means you stay informed. You understand the big picture trends. You adjust gradually and intelligently. Maybe 5 years ago, bonds paying 2% made sense as part of your portfolio. Today, with inflation running higher, those same bonds are losing you money in real terms. Maybe your plan assumed healthcare costs would grow at 3% a year, but they are actually growing at 6%. You need to know this and adjust. Dalio built his entire career on being radically open-minded and constantly updating his understanding based on new information. He was not afraid to admit when he was wrong. He was not married to old ideas just because they used to work. And this is critical in retirement because you could easily live another 30 or 40 years. The world will be radically different 30 years from now than it is today. Your plan has to be able to adapt. Think about someone who retired in 1990. They could not have predicted the internet revolution, the 2008 financial crisis, the pandemic, the way technology would change everything. If they had locked into a rigid plan and never adjusted, they would have been in trouble. But if they stayed flexible, stayed informed, and adjusted their principles as the world changed, they could have thrived. This is why I love Dalio's approach so much. It is not about predicting the future. It is about building a system that works no matter what the future brings. It is about principles that hold true whether the market goes up or down, whether inflation is high or low, whether we are in boom times or recession. As we wrap up these 10 brutal lessons, I want you to think about where you are right now. Are you coasting toward retirement, hoping everything works out? Are you following a plan someone else gave you without really understanding it? Are you making decisions based on emotion instead of principle? Are you lying to yourself about your spending, your health, your real financial situation? Because here is the final brutal truth. Retirement is not something that happens to you. It is something you create through thousands of small decisions over decades. Every dollar you spend or save today, every investment choice you make, every year you decide to work or not work, every conversation you have with your spouse about money, every time you choose your health or ignore it, all of it compounds into the retirement you will actually live.